Well, keep your Bible open here to Matthew 6. We'll be spending a majority of our time examining the text that Ryder just read for us as we continue on in our discussion of Jesus' words here, the Sermon on the Mount, talking primarily here at the beginning of chapter 6 and moving through it about our commitment or our loyalty to God, to His kingdom, to His King. He began that section talking about what is arguably the greatest threat to that. And I think we hear Jesus' words and we say, well, that's not describing me. I love God. I love Him. I love His kingdom. I love His Son who gave His life for me. I want to live in total allegiance to Him. And He says the greatest threat to that is actually yourself and your love of yourself, your pride, that stands in a position to poison all of our aspirations of love towards Him. But second to that, a threat to our love to God is the treasures of this earth. This is what I hope we will see as we spend our time here this evening, looking at how these treasures, which do represent money, as Ryder's translation kind of wrapped that up with, that word that kind of glares. You can't love God or can't serve God and serve money. It does represent that, but it also represents the value system of this world. The value that we place on the tangible, the value that we place on the things in front of us compared to the value that we place in heaven and on the things of God. Jesus is attempting to persuade His audience that if you are given the choice between the things of this earth and the things of heaven, have a heart that is resolved towards a commitment to the latter. He begins that by using these words: do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. And immediately my mind goes back to conversations that I've had in the past as me and friends, or maybe in a Bible study, or maybe you're talking with coworkers, but you're complaining a little bit about things that are hard, and somebody brings up maybe that they saw an interview with someone that was rich and famous, and they said, we're just talking about how hard it is to have all of this money, and have all of this wealth, and all of this fame, and you kind of went, yeah, give me those problems any day compared to the problems that I have. We struggle with this concept, that with wealth and with prosperity comes great problems and troubles. The 18th century writer Thomas Carlyle said, adversity is sometimes hard upon a man, but for the one man who can stand prosperity, there are 100 that will stand adversity. I think we tend to think that stuff makes life better. And we fail to see the point that Mr. Carlyle is making here. We say, oh, I could handle all of the problems that life could throw at me. And these people complaining about the problems that success has brought them, those are small potatoes. But how many have fallen under the weight of wealth? Scripture makes the very same point that Carlyle is making here. If you open your Bibles to James chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. James chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. James begins this section talking about this language that already kind of sets us on edge. This doesn't make sense. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. As you go through hardships, recognize that is an opportunity for you to rejoice. And we say, why? Why would I ever rejoice over this? But as we get into this passage, notice that specifically in verse 9, notice the amount of time that James spends on representing his concepts and his thoughts. Verse 9, the brother of humble circumstances is to glory in his high position. Okay, the brother of humble circumstances, he's got hardships. The brother that doesn't have everything in the world, the brother who is poor or impoverished, he is to glory in his high position as a child of God. Verse 9. We get that. We read that. And it's not terribly difficult for us to understand. You've got this person that doesn't have much, but they have Christ, and you are to glory in your high position. Verse 10 and 11. The rich man is to glory in his humiliation, because, like the flowering grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises with a scorching wind and withers the grass, and its flower falls off, and the beauty of its appearance is destroyed. So too the rich man in the midst of his pursuit will fade away. You ever wonder why he doesn't give a great explanation for verse 9? You ever wonder why he writes to his audience and says, the man of humble circumstances, he's going to glory in his place of honor, his high position? Let me tell you why that is. He doesn't do that. But when he brings up the rich man and calls for him to glory in his humiliation, immediately he has to qualify that. He has to explain to us why that is, because even in his day, when we hear about rich people, we don't think that their problems are really all that bad. Why on earth? Why on earth would he ever be humiliated? Why on earth would he be describing this situation the way that he is? What he's saying is rich people have problems, and it's almost impossible for us to recognize. Interestingly, Thomas Carlyle's wife also comes to this realization. Thomas had that great quote that I read a moment ago. One man who can stand prosperity, there are 100 who will stand adversity. But Thomas Carlyle's wife was giving she was doing an autobiography of his life, and she was asked a question about what life was like married with him. And she says this. I'm not sure that Thomas would have appreciated it. She said, "I'm married for ambition." Does that sound familiar? I'm married for ambition. If you were in one of her classes, you might have heard something similar. I'm married for ambition. Carlyle has exceeded all that my wildest hopes ever imagined of him. And I am miserable. Jane Welsh Carlyle. I think what she is describing is something the writer of Ecclesiastes, Solomon, makes the same point. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verses 10 through 15. If your Bible was open there, what you would be reading about is how earthly prosperity doesn't necessitate security. Earthly prosperity doesn't necessitate happiness. It's here and then it's gone. We worked for it and then somebody else gets to use it. It doesn't provide for us the promise that it just continually is saying it's going to provide. When Jesus speaks about it, he speaks about things such as moths and rusts and thieves. And maybe those things don't resonate as much with us as they would in his day, as he spoke with that to people who were living in mud brick houses, who all of their life savings and all of their efforts to gain prosperity could literally be gone overnight with someone with a pickaxe. Just shovel through the back of your house and take your stuff. Your clothes, you could open your closet up and all of your clothes are destroyed. And we live in a world of air conditioning and preservation. I literally had a conversation the other day with a guy talking about the door and how well this door will be able to seal in and protect my house. We have all of these great things that some of the things he says here we don't think too often about. We have ourselves protected. But we're one electrical fire away from it all turning into ash. We're one storm away from it all being blown over. Peter's point in 2 Peter 3:10 is that's what Jesus is calling for us to see. Pun intended, it's all going up in smoke. Something is going to happen. A day of judgment is coming. And the things of this world are reserved for destruction. But yet we struggle to learn these points. We struggle to see that earthly stuff isn't secure. We struggle to see that it's short-lived and not long, not eternal. And because of that, materialism destroys us. Even though we can stand back and all day long we can walk around saying it's foolish to rest our souls on a crumbling foundation of vapor. It's foolish to rest all my hopes and my dreams on that which could be gone tomorrow. And then we do it. And we know that it doesn't make sense. And we do it anyway. One author wrote it this way: the power of covetousness turns our common sense into quivering jelly. Materialism destroys us. And we hold up a charade of faithfulness and say, no, look, I come to church 3 times a week. And I'm giving money into our collection, and I am giving to others. I am not materialistic. And yet, when circumstances come our way, and trouble is before us, and when given a choice between heavenly things or earthly things. Let me just take trouble out of the picture for a minute and just put that. When given the choice between things of heaven and things of earth, we repeatedly pick things of earth. That is what we're going to spend our time, our money, our efforts, our focus. That is what we're going to spend it on. And Jesus' point, if you just skip down a little bit from don't store up treasures on earth, his point is that we can fool ourselves with this charade, but the heart tells the truth. The truth is our heart belongs to our treasure. And every time we uncover a gem in this pursuit of finding the treasures of this earth, every time we uncover a gem and we have mined and we have worked and we have labored and we finally see it kind of popping up out of the soil, and we finally find it and we pick it up just to find that really all it is a piece of glass from a broken bottle. And we get that all the joy that we thought we'd have, it's gone. And what do? We stick it in a collection at home and we start looking for the next piece that we're going to hopefully fill that hole in our lives. We never get discouraged in our pursuit. Whether that looks like I have to have that raise, I have to have that car, I need to have this new phone, or I want to go to this game, I want to be involved with this group, I have to have this, I want this. This is what's going to make me feel accepted. This is what's going to make me feel like I have power. This is what's going to make me feel like I am loved. This is what I need in my life. Then we go to the game, and it's over. And we're left going, I can't wait for the next one. We get the new thing, the new car, the new phone. And in a couple years, a new model is out, and we're looking for that one. We get the increase in our pay, and we find that, as life does, that money just doesn't go nearly as far as we thought it would go. All of these treasures that seem so robust and so certain, all of a sudden seem so very weak and so very flimsy. And then Jesus' words start to make a little bit more sense. And we start to recognize that what he's talking about here, when he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, isn't so much to do with my bank account. And it isn't so much to do with how I spent my weekend and how I spend my evening hours. And it's a lot more to do with my loyalty. And a lot more to do with my allegiance. Who is it that I am ultimately committed to? I wonder if what Jesus intends for us to hear as he speaks these words is stop saying that you're focused on heavenly treasures when your life is screaming that it's the earthly ones that you will give everything for. And he expresses that thought in two different ways that are meant to get our attention and to really make us think. Verses 22 and 23, he talks about this idea of your eye being the lamp of the body. And there's been a whole lot to be made over this metaphor that he uses, but I think it's a very simple point. If you imagine for a moment a windowless room, you walk into a room in the center of a house, and the only source of light to illuminate that room is a single lamp. He says your eye functions like that lamp towards your body. And here's how he kind of starts describing it. What's the quality, what's the state of that lamp? Is the lamp filled with oil that is polluted? Maybe it's got water, it's got dirt in it, causing the flame not to burn very bright or to flicker very often. If that's the case, oftentimes what happens is the flame starts to create a whole lot of smoke, a whole lot of soot. Or if your wick on that lamp isn't trimmed right, if it's too long or too short, it'll do the same thing. When that happens, the glass on the outside of the lamp, it becomes coated in that, and it gets black and dim, and all of a sudden, this lamp that's supposed to be illuminating your room puts off very little light. It's very dim. And it causes the room to be darkened. Understanding comes from recognizing something about the word Jesus used when he describes this eye or this lamp. And if you were following along with Ryder, I think his translation said something about it being the eye being good or maybe clear. Clear is what the New American Standard says. You might have healthy, if the eye is healthy or if the lamp is healthy. But if you're reading from the King James Version, not so much the New King James, but the Old King James Version, you might have a very odd word there. That's the word single. Your eye is single. The reason that word is used is because of an old translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. It was the Greek translation that Jesus and his disciples would have also likely read from. And it used that word, single. And it meant singleness in purpose, or singleness as in undivided loyalty. And I hope that draws your mind back to something Jesus said earlier in the Sermon on the Mount when he talked about being pure in heart. And we mentioned as we looked at those words that idea of pure in heart doesn't necessarily mean sinless, but a heart that is pure. It doesn't have other things tucked in with it. A heart that is singularly focused on something. It's the very same idea here. He describes a clear, healthy, or singularly focused eye that provides light to a person who is focused on God with an unwavering, uncompromised gaze. Contrast that with the eye that is bad, or diseased, or unhealthy, or maybe evil, depending on your translation. The word here is used not just to express that the functioning of this lamp or this eye isn't proper, but also that it is something that brings with it labor and toil and hardship and peril that are purposeless. For one who thinks his eye is good, and yet it is really bad. That's the words Jesus uses. Think of the view of that person who has convinced themselves this lamp is giving me all the light that I need. But the lamp is really darkened and dim and clouded. His view of his loyalty to the kingdom is nominal. And it's shallow. And he is deceived. In fact, this person's darkness, as Jesus described, is the greatest darkness because he's fooled into thinking I'm walking in the light. And yet he's walking in darkness. He follows that up with another metaphor that we sometimes also struggle with because of some of the language that he uses. When he says that you cannot serve two masters. And I don't think it's accidental. I don't think that he accidentally describes slavery as he brings this up. And we have a tendency to bring this into our world and say, well, he's talking about something like employment. The problem is the metaphor falls apart with employment. Because there have been plenty of people who have been able to be employed by two employers and to be able to keep both of them satisfied and working hard for them. But following his metaphor of a house filled with darkness, we need to see what's really going on. And we can't do that if we're not focused on God and if we're not focused on his light. And in doing so, we become ensnared, captured by our own deception. As we think about his phrase that he uses connected to this, either you will hate the one or you will love the other. That is idiomatic. It's important for us to see that. It's not our typical view of love or hate, and I wonder if that might sometimes kind of hinder us as we walk down this path and kind of go, I'm giving God some, but there's also some things over here that are really important to me, and what's going to be the buffer? What's going to be that test that goes, okay, I've gone too far one direction. Well, it's if I start hating God, because that's what Jesus said here. You're either going to love one or you're going to hate the other. But that kind of in and out sort of thinking, or concrete sort of thinking, black and white sort of thinking about love and hate is not correct in the way that Jesus uses that language. And I'll give you another example of that. In Luke chapter 14, verse 26, Jesus said, "You cannot be a follower of mine if you don't hate your parents." But then also in Mark chapter 7, in verses 9 through 13, he said, "Parents are to be honored." That should tell us something about the usage of this language of love and hate. The language implies that one of the alternatives will be greatly preferred over the other. We can sit here right now. We can sit in this building that we have set aside time to come and be in and say it's very obvious that I greatly prefer God over the world. But when that choice arises, when a crisis occurs, when another alternative is entered in, I can study, I can spend time in prayer, I can spend time serving, I can spend time working for the kingdom, or I can toil in the kingdom of the world. I can devote myself to the things of the world. When these alternatives arise, our allegiances get quickly sorted into their proper places. I'll give you an observation to think on about that. You apply for work and you get 2 job offers. How do you start breaking up those offers to discover which one's going to be the greatest? For many of us, it might be that our first thought is, well, we're going to do the one that pays the most. How many of us will choose the one that allows us to work in a way to serve God the best? Even if that means we don't make as much money. Or if we've set aside money for a specific purpose. Maybe it is to set aside money for benevolence in some way. We as a congregation here support several men overseas. Maybe you've said, I'm setting aside this money because I want as an individual to give a little bit extra to that very specific purpose. And so I'm going to give some money to go to one of the men that we support overseas. And then you're walking through the store and all of a sudden you see that thing. To quote my dad, and it's kind of a running joke, we get the phone call from him and he said, well, I just always wanted one of these. I say, Dad, you'd never seen one of those before until today. I always wanted one of these. What happens to our commitment? Jesus uses 3 concepts. 3 concepts, treasure, light, and slavery. And he asks his audience to reflect and to ask themselves this question. Where do my allegiances lie? He doesn't spend his time saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't go enjoy, the things that I mentioned. You can't go and get a new car, enjoy a game, a night out. You can't buy cell phones. You can't take the job that makes more money. He doesn't spend his time doing those things. He says, who are you most loyal to? Who has your heart? Who are you committed to in a way that will not be moved, that will not deviate from its purposes? If you're like me, you probably would have had an answer to that question before reading these passages. And if you're like me, you took inventory. You took inventory of your house as you went through it. And what you find is a lot of worldly treasures on shelves. You find a whole lot of trophies from past adventures. Or worse, what you find is all of the discards that are at the bottom of the closet that you just can't bear to get rid of. Hoarded up because you know what? Somehow they still have value, even though I have found they were nothing but glass trinkets and they didn't offer anything that I thought, but I just can't let go. Because my life, my identity, my allegiance is tied up in relying upon them. Somewhere in the back of that closet, underneath all of the blankets and the bags and the leftover things, is a chest. And inside that chest, a treasure that glows brighter than any light is the light of heaven. And we are asked by Jesus to consider which one is most important. Which one are you choosing today? What I'm very, very thankful of as we think about Jesus' words here is that when the lamp gets dirty, He doesn't say it's time for me just to toss this one out. He says, I can clean it. I can restore it. I can transform it. I can change it into something that shines my light. He uses that language in Colossians chapter 1, verse 13, when Paul writes to us in praise of God, saying that we have been rescued from the domain of darkness and transferred into the kingdom of His Son. Let's adopt kingdom minds. Let's love kingdom things. Let's be devoted to the King's ways. That begins right now by submitting yourself to the King. If we can assist you this evening in doing that, in making a commitment to Him, to follow in His paths, and to put allegiance to Him above all else, we want to assist you in that. If you are here today and you realize my allegiance, while strong in the past, has become devoted elsewhere, but I am ready to give it back to my King, He is ready to receive you back. However we can assist you, let's talk about it together as we stand and as we sing.